So that's the story behind, I got arrested by the KGB for taking pictures of ducks.
Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Fat. I am your host, Big Rob. Thank you so much for tuning in, downloading, following the podcast on Instagram, listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcast at. I appreciate it. And thank you for the folks recently who wrote reviews for the podcast. That means so much to me. That you care enough to actually say, hey, this is making an impact. I love what I'm hearing. And it helps more people to find the podcast. So thank you so much for your support in that way. I'm excited about my guest today. I've known Ted for maybe over just 2 years. We work in retail together. We have a lot of the WebEx calls to have to keep in touch pretty much on a weekly basis. But he has such an interesting backstory. I cannot wait for him to share it with you. Please welcome Ted Cheney.
Hey, good afternoon, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Ted. Thank you so much for taking some time to sit and talk with me, man. I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the past couple of years. Just the little bit that I have, and I just love your backstory, and I love your heart, and I can't wait for this opportunity to share it with folks. You've got such an interesting background.
Yeah, it's kind of cool too. I think the fact that we've never met face to face, but yet we have a really, really good knowledge about one another. What really drives one another. And so it's cool that we live in a society that really has that kind of capability. And so I'm super stoked about this. When I found out you had a podcast, it piqued my interest. It's something I've always been interested in. But then to find out more about it, then for you to extend an invitation beyond and dive in a little bit deeper. I think you do an incredible job. I've listened to a bunch of them. And I'm just stoked about I'm a process guy. I love seeing process. I love how you set this whole thing up. So I'm just glad to be here. You've made it super, super easy to do so.
Oh, well, thank you, Ted. To get some background on you, so you're calling in from the Atlanta area right now, correct?
Yep. I live in Roswell.
Roswell. Okay. Yeah. Not the New Mexico one. No,
Area
not
51. The New Mexico one, but no, this is the closest I could get to aliens. So,
So where are you from originally, though, Ted?
I was born in Pensacola, Florida, but when asked that question, challenged with that, I tell people I'm an American because I have lived in every part of this country. I've lived in New England. I've lived in the Mid-Atlantic. I've lived all over the Southeast. I've traversed the breadbasket of America multiple times, and I've lived in the deserts of Nevada. So I've been to extended stays out in California, Chicago, New York, Boston. So I've lived everywhere. So,
do you have some place that you call home more than where your feet are currently planted? Or is
that's where the pillow is. It really, really is. Wherever that pillow is that's where I've got a favorite pillow. So wherever that thing's at, that's where I'm going to be hanging out. But no, both my kids live here in the Atlanta area. They had gone away, but they've kind of come back. It's just nice to have them in the area. My first grandson, he's 2.5. We spend a lot of time with him. So, we like this, but, my whole life, we always grew up, with relatives being a long distance away.
Yeah.
So, I've learned to do that. I've got a brother who lives in Mississippi, one in Alaska, and my dad lives in California. My mom passed away here in the Atlanta area 10 years ago. But he's remarried. My stepsister lives with them. So it's just, I don't know where to say, every place I've lived, well, I have had so much fun. Everything is different. And so I think that's a big part of my perspective on life as well, too, is you can lament whatever it is in the past or what I'm missing, or I'm an adventurer. I would have been in the 14, 15, 1600s. I would have been saying, hey, how do I get on one of those boats and go looking for a different place and a different adventure?
That's awesome. Yeah, you seem to have that kind of nomadic soul. Like I said, that something that's like, what else is out there? What else can I experience? What else can I, find? As we were talking and finding out more about your background. Of course, one of the things that piqued my interest was your time that you spent in Moscow, and we'll get to that in just a few few minutes. But prior to that, until you sent me some of the your highlights on your bio, which you can find on the website, and I'm not wanting you to read through your bio, but you've done so much when you talk about all of that moving. What was the reason for the move? Are you a military kid or?
Yeah. I'm a Navy brat. My dad, my dad was a Mustang in the Navy. Well, that means he started out and enlisted as an enlisted guy, made it to chief. And he did that right around the time of World War II. The Vietnam War was really building up. And so they had, this huge influx of college students or college graduates in their officers corps, but they had, so they had school smarts, but they had no military background whatsoever. So the Navy had a program called NECEPS, where what they did was they took the best of their enlisted, gave them a college education, and filtered them into the officers corps as well too. So I was a benefactor of that, and the fact that I don't see it as we moved around a lot. It was always a new school. I was always the new kid in class. But for me, it was always, hey, something new, something I haven't experienced before. That's just the way that I took it. Now, that's kind of like a learned behavior than it is something I think is naturally what it is. But you can sit there and analyze, logically, what am I going to do here in this situation? And what's best for me? And I could, like I said, I could be a sad sack and just really hold back and just long for something that I won't have. Or I can make the best of the situation where I was. And so I developed a skill set for talking to people, learning about them. Oftentimes there's some cross link because I've been so many places. I know what it's like to be a kid in New England. I know what it's like a kid to grow up in the desert. There's just so many different things. It's just, who I am.
So when you started to get a little bit more mature, say you're getting out of high school and you're trying to find a career path for yourself, were you able to take some of that kind of flexibility and personality and kind of decide which way you wanted to go for a career?
I had no idea. And, I remember my senior year of high school, I was finishing up. I had met this girl that I really liked in high school. She's now my wife. We've been married for about 42 years.
Wow.
But we had just moved there. I had just moved there my senior year in high school. I moved from Nevada to Central Florida. And 6 months in, living there, I meet her. 3 months after that, I'm working at her mom's bank because I think her mom liked me. And so I was working part-time there, getting ready to graduate, had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to college at some point, but I had moved around so much and I didn't want to be the new kid in class again. Now, I didn't remember freshman college classes. Everybody was a new kid in class.
Right.
But I didn't think about that, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I remember it was like one weekend afternoon, I came home from work and my dad was there and he had retired from the Navy and he was now working for Piper Aircraft in Lakeland. He helped design the avionics packages for the couple models of planes that that they built out of that factory there. And we were talking and he goes, so, he asked me that very question, Rob. He said, what do you want to do with, I'm 18. When are you leaving, dude?
Right.
So that's not what he was saying, but because he was, I had a great mom and dad. They were so supportive and everything. They weren't wealthy, rich, we got along well. But we lived in military housing most of my life. And so it's just, just moving around. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, Dad, I have no idea. It's just, I've been exposed to so many different things. I love so many different things. I'm having a hard time narrowing it down. And he said, well, have you ever thought about the military? And he goes, recently I actually have. And he said, well, what would you join? And I said, well, first of all, I am not a Marine. That's not my mentality. Yeah. I respect those guys. Everybody's different. That's the one thing I've learned. Everybody's different. Everybody's built differently. Everybody has their unique strengths or giftings. Some of it's God-given, some of it's God-given, and they've built on it.
Mm-hmm.
Other parts of it, they've really worked hard because this is something that, however they got there. For me, it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I was not a Marine. I was never a big fan of the Army. It just seemed like it was a big organization, and I didn't know it. I knew the Navy ranking system and what that life was like. And I thought, hey, you know what? I think I could handle that, but it was definitely not the Army. I knew it was definitely not the Air Force because my dad was in a lot of aviation air stations, and being at those and then sometimes crossing air stations or Air Force stations, it just always seemed boring to me. There was always, everybody was inside a building or inside of a hangar. There was nobody doing anything outside. And it just seemed too academic for me. And so I said, I'm thinking about joining the Navy. And he goes, well, why haven't you considered the Coast Guard? And I thought, I wanted to join the military. And he goes, well, no, the Coast Guard is military.
Yeah, everybody.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know at all. And so, I thought, he goes, yeah. He says, as a matter of fact, during the time of war, they come out from underneath. I think they were the Department of Transportation at the time. Now they're, what do you call it? I'll think of it in a second. But they revert under the Department of Navy. So I kind of scratched my head and I said, let me think about all this. I don't know what I want to do. And so it was a valuable conversation. And one of the things that he said to me that really caused me to think seriously about the Coast Guard was he says, all the other branches of service you've talked about, they're always practicing for something you hope they don't have to do, and that's go to war. And I thought, and I'm talking about their core mission. And so I thought, but he said the Coast Guard's doing their core mission 24/7 every day of the week, every week of the year.
Yeah.
And I thought, so, this is 1979. I've just graduated. I'm 18. It's just an interesting time. Legal drinking age in Florida at the time was 18. So now I could legally drink. I could vote. The 80 election was coming up. So there's all these things that as a young man, you're just, I don't want to say you're being bombarded with, but there are choices that now you've got to deal with.
Yeah.
And a life goal or a life mission was one of them. So I went to work. I was now working full time at the bank. It was after I graduated. And it was sometime in mid-June. And the closest recruiter, there was no internet. So you had to look in the yellow pages, and the closest recruiter was downtown Tampa, which was about an hour drive. I had a car. And so when I went to work that afternoon, I was Thursday. I said, hey, can I have tomorrow afternoon? I need to go over to Tampa. And I didn't tell them why. And so that Friday afternoon, I got my car after lunch and just drove to Tampa, showed up at the recruiting office and just started, they had big posters everywhere and counters. It was just, it was really well done. It won me over graphically, and I'm very, very visually driven. And started out, and the guy came over and I said, I'm just looking around, shopping for what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Just pick something off the career shelf,
exactly.
Try this on.
Is there a money back guarantee on this one? So anyway, I sat there and I went over to him. I said, so tell me, what do I got to do to join? I'm kind of very interested. He says, well, what do you want to do? And at the time, growing up with a buddy out in the desert, we had both said we wanted to be doctors, and I thought that I did. I thought that I had the chops academically to do. I was a B minus student, but that's because I didn't apply myself. Things came to me very, very naturally. My mom and my dad had prepared me well through school and they provided all the nurturing conditions to make me grow intellectually, all that stuff. Nothing special. They left it to me. And so I was just always into something different. And so I said, I was thinking about, sometime maybe in the future going to college and becoming a doctor. And he says, well, we have a corpsman school. That would be really close. But it requires a certain great education level or vocational level. So I want you to take this test, an ASVAB, or Armed Forces Vocational Battery Test.
Yeah.
So I took it, and he said, "Here, go. The soda machines are over on this floor or whatever." So I went and grabbed a soda and a snack, some crackers, and came back. And he said, "Wow." He said, "You can be anything you want in the Coast Guard. You passed all the levels." And, at that point, I didn't think about anything else because that was kind of where I was leaning. So he said, "Here's what we can do." He says, "We've got this delayed entry program where what you'll do is we'll have your summer off. Just don't get in trouble. And you'll come back and in the fall, October 4th, you'll start boot camp and you'll get out just in time in front of Christmas, take your 10 days off, and then show up right after the new year in a corpsman school, guaranteed corpsman school. You're ready to go, just straight in there, and off you go."
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's cool. So I signed up, and said, went home, and the next day, Saturday morning, I said, "Hey, I signed up for the Coast Guard yesterday." And so my dad's talking to me about it and filling me in, and I tell him, and I even got guaranteed corpsman school. And he goes, "What are you doing that for?" He said, "Why are you taking a guaranteed school?" And I said, "Man, with your drive for education, I thought you would have been, super stoked that I did that. Guaranteed, I'm locked in, ready to go." And he goes, "No," he goes, "You don't know what you want to do." And so you've kind of like pigeonholed yourself into that spot. He said, "My recommendation would be for you to call up that recruiter, tell him you don't want the guaranteed school, and just go to a ship and then watch what everybody does on the ship and see what interests you the most. And then in the military, or at least in the maritime services, in the Army, in the Navy and the Coast Guard, you can strike, they call it. So it's like on the job training where you say, you get to the ship and let's say you want to be, and this is what happened to me. I got there and I loved what was going on around where they steered the ship, the helm.
Mm-hmm.
That was just, all that was going on there. And the quartermasters, man, those guys were looking at their maps and they were plotting their angles and where they were at. And whenever there was something going on, they were right there in the thick of it. They knew what was happening. So I thought, information, a challenge, being there with all the action. I thought that's what I want to do. But right now I'm still signed up for guaranteed corpsman school. My dad says, just call up the recruiter and say you don't want to go. So I thought about it for another week, and I called up the recruiter and I said, "Hey, I still want to join the Coast Guard, but I don't know if I want to go to this guaranteed school." And he goes, "What? Why would you want to go to a ship?" I said, I just want to do it. And he says, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave that guaranteed school in there in case you change your mind. You get to boot camp, when they ask you where you want to go for your orders, you say, I don't want to be corpsman school, and they're not going to waste the resources on you." So that's how I got in the Coast Guard. And I'm so glad that I did what my dad recommended, because it just turned into a completely different area. And it's what drove me into electronics, is through being on a ship, seeing some things happen, and said, you know what, that's where I want to be.
So when you got off the ship, where did that take you then? You say it took you into electronics.
Yeah. So I came out of boot camp, not going to guaranteed school, and they send me to the Cholula, which is stationed out of Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. What a beautiful place! What a cool! I lived a charmed life. My first year in the military, I got married to Linda, and she moved up there with me, and we were living in a beach house on the Atlantic. I could walk to work. She'd come by. We had one car. She had gotten a job as a teller at a local bank. And so we were going out to sea, and this is 1980, and the summer of 1980, the Cuban boat lift happens. So Jimmy Carter's now president. He had won the election, and the humanitarian crisis that was going on in Cuba at the time was just really escalated, and Carter, for a limited period of time, opened up our southern border so that the Cubans could come in, and they were coming over just loaded in as many boats, as many people in a boat as you could. And, for a 19, 20-year-old kid, this was just an eye-opening experience to be just in the thralls of,
wow.
We're literally, 20, 30 miles offshore off the Keys. And we're coming across these little teeny boats that have 20, people, just the gunnel's just barely above the water line, and there's people in there. Others are sinking. It was just a high-opening experience. You couldn't believe what it was. It was a beautiful setting. I mean, the water, it was, sunny Florida day,
Right.
Nice puffy white clouds. The blue water was so blue. It was flat, maybe sometimes a little bit of a chop, but it was just, you'd pick them up, and we were what they call it freeboard, which is how far it is from the water line to the gunnel where you could pull somebody up over that ledge was a good 10 to 14 feet. And so for somebody to climb up a web, somebody that's not in any kind of shape, climbing up a web or ladder up the side of a boat that's rocking at sea, it's physically strenuous. And we were like monkeys. We were going up and down, grabbing these grandmothers, basically strapping what they call a painter's chair, which is just a wooden board with two pieces of rope coming out of it on each side and a carabiner. And we put it on a harness that we could clip on the center of our chest, put the grandmother in there and just walk up the side of the boat with our hands behind her, just holding her so she doesn't flip over backwards. And just, we have a couple hundred people on our, just pulling a couple hundred people on our boat, putting them on the fantail and then zipping into Key West to drop them off. So that was such a cool experience and eye-opening. But shortly after that, we had to medevac somebody off the plane. They'd had a hernia or some kind of medical distress. And so I was trained in how to, when they landed that basket on the deck, how are you supposed to handle it so that you didn't get electrocuted with the static electricity? Because there's tens of thousands of volts in there and a lot of amperage that'll kill you if you don't handle it properly. So they dropped that on the deck, and I went out there and we loaded this guy in there, and they went off. And I just remember when that helo pulled up on our fantail, he's about 30 feet off the ground. He's just sitting there hovering. I'd never been under prop wash of a helo before. And it was just like, you're sitting there and it's really loud and it's really, windy. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you're underneath the tip of that rotor on the helicopter, all of a sudden your environment just changes. Yeah. Now it's all of a sudden there's no noise. It just, because you're in this really super high pressure center. So your hearing is kind of diminished and all the noise is washed away. Yeah. Now it's to breathe instead of having to, now you had to really push to exhale, and all you had to do is just relax and your lungs would fill up with air. It was just completely different.
That's gotta be like surreal.
It was mesmerizing. It's just sitting, this guy sitting there in an orange Nomex flight suit with an orange and white helmet, and he's got the little sunglass visors coming through. I have never seen anybody cooler in my entire life than the guy that was handling that cage and that helo 30 feet above my head. And what a stud that guy's picture presented. He was just I thought, oh my God, I've got to be in aviation. Yeah. This is what he's doing, what I was born to do. I wanted to join and do what he did. So soon as we secured from that, I ran down below and on the port passageway, there was a little billet board, and it's where they posted all the information. And I knew on that billet board was a list of all the schools that you'd go to as an enlisted man. It had the rating, and it had how long the waiting list was for it. And so all the aviation billets started with an A. So I went, and there was like 8 of them, or not 10 of them, or 11 of them, or whatever. And I didn't even know what the billets were. I was just looking for one with the shortest wait list. And there was one with 2 weeks, and it was an AT. I had no idea what an AT was, but I ran down to the yeoman's office and said, "Hey, take me off the list for being a quartermaster. I want to go to AT school." And he looked at me and he goes, "That's the hardest school to get into. That's why the waiting list is so short. You got to be a genius to get in there." And I said, "Well, the recruiter told me that I could get into any school." And he goes, "There's no way." I said, look at my jacket." So he opens up my records. He looks in there and he goes, son of a bitch, you can go to AT school. So now it was longer than 2 weeks. It took me about eight months to get off the ship. But I went to aviation. So I went to aviation tech. It was an aviation electronic technician. So as soon as I found out what it was, when we pulled into port, I went to Radio Shack, which was a big store back then. Yeah. That was the electronic stores. It was like, in my eyes as a kid growing up, Radio Shack was like 10 times what it was like to go into an Apple store.
Yeah.
It was just because there were electronic tubes in there. My dad knew how to use those, and he would troubleshoot our TV by going through and replacing the tubes out of Radio Shack. And you could buy, and I would buy all these electronic kits when I was a kid and solder them together. Had no idea what was going on, but I knew how to build them. Yeah. And they were fun to play with. So, but that was just a little bit of who I was. So that's I went and got a couple books and just started studying and graduated number one in my class in AT school. So
that's awesome. That is so awesome.
That's how I got going in that regard.
Yeah. So after AT school, how much longer did you stay in the military?
I was just in 4 years. I stayed in for 4 years, 4.5 years, because I had to go to AT school. I had to extend a little bit because it was coming up on. It was going to push me past the 2-year mark, and they wanted me to be an AT for at least 2 years.
Gotcha.
So, or it was either that or to make grade because I made it to E5. So I was an aviation electronics technician, second class. So I was one step away from first class, and then you could go to chief. And I thought if I stayed in, I'd do that. But now I was, as much as life had challenged me. I was relatively newly married, 2 or 3 years. The responsibility, I'd learned, the military for me, the best thing that I learned was this idea of authority and how you need to serve the authorities above you. And that by successfully doing that and making them successful, I learned that you would be successful as well too. So that was something I learned early on. I learned that you could, and if you were if you were in that kind of state, you could, hardworking, dependable, and constantly trying to drive to become an expert in your role. I quickly learned that if they had a special assignment, they'd reach out to the guys that were hard charging, and so I was identified as one of those. So it benefited me in a lot of different ways in my military career. And when I wanted to get out, they let me out a little bit early so that I could start my first semester of college, which was up in East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee, which is where my folks lived. My wife and I moved up into that area. I enrolled in school and just fell in love with being a college student, not from the traditional gaming stuff, but it was this idea that I had direct access to some people that were really, really top notch in their area, and I wanted to learn as much as I could. And so it was really for me very, very rewarding experience. And and in that, I found a natural love was related to electronics, which was chemistry, specifically organic chemistry. I loved it. Started working in a lab there very early in my science career, started working towards maybe even just blasting right through a BS and moving to a master's or a PhD in chemistry.
Wow.
When a lady ran a red light, hit me, put me in the hospital for about a week. And I was putting myself through school, me and my wife, and it just became a delicate financial balance.
Wow.
It was a delicate financial balance the way we were doing it. I was working part-time at Radio Shack, and she was working full-time for Merrill Lynch as initially a sales assistant and then as an advisor, beginning advisor. And it was just, things were tight, and she had an opportunity for a job move, and we made that. And the area we went to was a mistake. I'm not going to mention it, but we just didn't like the area. It just felt more backwards and more separated from family than we wanted to be at the time. So we moved back, and at that point, the way we were able to move back is I got a job with a computer company that was a Apple developer.
Oh, wow.
First in sales, B2B sales, and then and I moved into product management, and that's what started all of that. So now
where, and I'm assuming, what I know of you is you are very, well, again, this is from our WebEx relationship that we have here, is you're a very empathetic and caring person. And I know that is,
that's 100% my mom.
Really? That's where it came from?
Yeah. That's my mom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's no, just thinking about it, I'm tearing up because, she was a special lady. She was a Navy's wife, so she, an officer's wife. So she's, there's hardship associated with that. Dad would be overseas for 6 months, and she'd have 3 crazy boys running through her house, ages, I was in, so I was, when Dad went overseas, when I was in high school, which was probably the hardest time for her. I was, I was in the 9th grade. So I had my young brother was in the 7th grade, and he was a handful. And I had a baby brother that was like in about the 3rd grade. So it was 2nd, 3rd grade. So we were a handful. There's no doubt about it. But she was so much fun. She was the most empathetic. She held you accountable. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if we messed up, you would just wait till your dad gets home and we'd get spanked. I mean, there was, so I learned not to get spanked real soon. I didn't like that experience. And so the best way to do that was, they were the ones footing the bill, if you want to think of it like that.
Yeah.
And, as a kid, they were my parents. I wanted to be not a burden, but some help. So, I learned, when Dad was away to be something that to be a person that my mom could depend upon.
Wow.
And that was a shaping influence in my life, was my mom and just the way she would deal with issues and problems. But in that, the going through, I had kids, we had friends, we homeschooled our kids. And if you're part of that early homeschooling movement, and why, I don't know, but it was a fantastic preparation for when we decided to move to Russia.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is how did you go from, programming operating systems to going to... I
wasn't programming operating systems. I understood what the programmers were having to try to do.
Right.
Because I was working for a company at the time that was an Apple developer. We had a special relationship with Apple and a whole bunch of software developers. Mm-hmm. But the way we talked about it in that company is that we were always living on the bleeding edge. We were not living on the leading edge. We were not we were out. We were test pilots, really, in the biggest sense of the word. And so there was a lot of risk that the CEO of the company took on for Daystar Digital. His name's Andrew Lewis. I have the greatest admiration for that because I learned so much from watching him really try to build a $100 million annual sales plus company. In a really competitive, rapidly changing technology environment. Mm-hmm. And so that, working for them and always at that pace, it was just always going. My kids were young, they were 5 and 3. They're 2 years apart, 5 and 3, 6 and 4. And it's about the same time. And this is a completely different story, but Steve Jobs comes back. Our company loses its license with Apple for a Mac OS system because Steve's taken in a completely different position, and it killed our company. It just absolutely decimated us, decimated a lot of people. Mm-hmm. A big part of that was, at the time, Apple had so many different models. There were so many different product lines, and they were all competing against one another. And I think about the same time that I went to Russia is about the same time Tim Cook came to Apple, through Steve and Deidre. His goal was, what he did was they had so many vendors. My understanding is that he helped with regards to Steve Jobs's responsibility was to contract the company to try to save it, and really focus on some key products, and that was going to be the iMac, initially, and really cut out. I think Tim Cook's, big, success to driving Apple to profitability was really tightening up the logistics side of it with regards to vendors. And so I think a lot of what he did then is benefiting the company now because he understands, intimately what that looks like when we're in, the market is globally constrained, logistically, COVID-wise, chip shortages. And what you see happening with that company now is, I think, just a testament to his skill set that he developed, those many years ago. So
was that around the time, do you think, that when you said
I was burned out,
the company decimated, so you just decided you need to find something completely different and on the other side of the world?
No, I started out working for another software company. It was kind of a cool story, really kind of a unique position or a unique tool. So life pace was a lot easier. It was a lot smaller company, a ton smaller company. And I had some great opportunity. But personally, I think it was more, and this is where life balance is really important, is just listening to my wife's cues, and recognizing, that I had, my career had been driving all the decisions in the family. And our girls had some needs as well, too. And one of them that we wanted to do was to try to expose them to things a little bit differently. And one of them came up in the fact that we had heard about this nonprofit, a ministry, that during Christmas, they'd go over to Russia and Moscow, and they had this outreach to retired school teachers. They would just love on them. And, that sounded like a great way of exposing my kids to something really cool. And so it was just supposed to be like about, 7-10 days is what we had envisioned. And so my wife started calling to find out, hey, we found out about it around Christmas time. So in January, we called. So this is January of 98. She called to find out a little bit more about it. And so she's sitting there talking to the guy, and she calls me up. This is cell phones, for the modern man. They kind of a novel thing. I think I had a business one, but you're paying per minute, and they were really expensive. So she called me on my work line, and she said it. She goes, "Hey, I just had the most interesting conversation." I said, "Well, what did he say?" He said, "Well, the part that I want you to call him about was, he said, why don't you go early and stay late and to this Christmas trip?" And I go, "What the hell does he mean by that?" He says they need families like ours to go over there and live and work in this orphanage, and that you would have kids in your family, almost like family style living with almost like a foster care program. And at the time we were foster cares in the state of Georgia we didn't have any kids at that time, but we'd had them like about 6 months before, and we were trying to evaluate what we wanted to do, moving on to the next, whether we wanted to continue to stay in that program or whatever. So that was just a part of who we were. We had 2 boys and a girl that had last lived with us. And there was legal issues with their parents, and there was trouble there. And so they had lost their parental rights. And so they were just waiting for some family members with regards to making a decision how they want to do it. So they were with us for a couple months, but they went to a really nice program up in North Georgia. But so that was going on, school, and then we got this invitation to go. So we just, I'm a believer. I'm not extreme right wings type of stuff. And this is a completely different track for a completely different thing. But, I felt that, as a family this might be the direction we were being pulled. And so, we prayed about it, and it it's unbelievable how many doors opened up. And so that August, I'm talking about from January, February to August, we had sold everything that we had, put it all on the table, and said, we're all in. And God continued to meet all of our needs for the next nearly 8 years through other people. That's a humbling experience as well, too, to be dependent upon others, not knowing, there were times where we were down to like no money whatsoever. And we weren't getting paid to be over there. We were paying to be there.
Oh, wow.
And so, God just miraculously opened up the windows of heaven. And it wasn't like it poured down like this guy that just got $743 after taxes in this lottery deal he just had in Ohio or Illinois or wherever it was. But it wasn't that strong or steady. And I don't think he would have given it to us that way, because it made us learn to be dependent upon God in a kind of unique and special way. And so we ended up being in Moscow for nearly 8 years, from 1998 to 2006. And it was the most rewarding experience. It was you learn you're not the smartest guy in the crowd. There's always something out there that's better than you. And there's always something going on in the world, both evil and good, constantly vying for your attention. And so it was just such a cool experience. I'd still be there, but one of Putin's major goals was to drive outside influence, to get it out of the country with regards to controlling the media, controlling the narrative, controlling the police. It was an amazing thing to be a firsthand witness to all that was taking place. Yeah. And, you tie that to what's going on now. We've still got good friends over there that we really can't communicate with because we don't want to endanger them in any way. And so we can keep up by looking, an occasional post that shows up in a Facebook or an email or a word from a friend that had talked to somebody. So, I think the whole problem over there is caused by by a handful of really self-centered, evil individuals. And they're holding a vast nation in the dark. So some of them don't even realize how badly they're being betrayed by the people that are over them. Yeah, that's my personal belief. Yeah. But it's evident in just seeing the way things are shaken out. So.
So in that preparation to go over there, because
there was no preparation, it was so fast. We were there. All the preparation took place over there.
So it's on the job training. I was going to say, did you learn a lot of Russian when you were there?
When I got there, I couldn't even say "Здравствуйте," which is hello, the formal way of saying hello. I couldn't roll my R's. I was clueless. Wow. But when I got over there, it was fun. We were working with kids that were, I had 2 daughters. So I got over there thinking, I'm a girl expert. They're going to give me girls. And they hand me 6 boys, ages 1st grade to 5th grade. Mm-hmm. And I had a 3rd grader and a 1st grader, and my 2 daughters. And it was wild to go from, a nice, quiet, I'm in control home. And now I'm living in a community filled with all kinds of different families and caring for, these Russian kids that some are true orphans, some their parents have lost custody, some their parents don't have the capability of maintaining a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. So it was a whole mismatch of things, and quickly learning the language to the best you could. It's a very phonetic language, which is, again, for me, being an analytical guy, I've learned that a lot of languages, the written aspect of it is just a consonant vowel pair, just all those just lined up. So once you learn the trick, you can understand you can speak the language, even though you may not understand it. It makes it easier to interpret and understand. And my wife and I were blessed to have there. They had some, Russian students that high school students that went on and became the interpreters, our tongues to speak and learning. And I had 2 phenomenal ones. The one that was there was very caring and very, almost like a young daughter type of thing. The other one, so that was Maria, and then there was Galina. And Linda and I were so blessed by that lady. She was young. She had got her law degree in Russia, and when I would speak, she was my voice, and I learned how to use that dialogue to where I could say something and think about what I was going to say next while she interpreted it. And as I learned the language, I could hear the way she was presenting it, and that helped speed my understanding. I spoke poorly, but I could understand okay enough to where, I knew I was in trouble or I wasn't in trouble. So, but there's so many amazing stories with regards to revolving around the language and the stuff that we did there. It's another episode. It really is. But God, I loved being there, and I'd still be there, I think, if they just hadn't made it so difficult for us. There's no way to maintain a ministry with regards to the imposition they were placing on being able to be in the country at the time. So.
Right. Right. Well, if you had to pick just one quick story that you could share right now from that time, what's something that lights you up?
Yeah. So what, and you probably have heard this, so you haven't heard the backstory to this story, but I've often told people, when you sometimes ask you, so tell me one tell me one thing that nobody knows about you. And so I like to say, well, I was arrested by the KGB for taking pictures of ducks. And they look at me and they go, oh, yeah. Of all the people that had just said what was so strange to them, that's the one that wins every single time, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah.
And what was happening was it was in 2004, actually 2003. This lady had come up from southern Russia near the Ukrainian border, and they were trying to develop a ministry or an outreach to these local neighborhoods, local orphanages. Whereas we have a foster program here, the way the Russians dealt with it was social, with a social mindset. Or socialism mindset was they put them in orphanages, and it's a horrible situation. It really, really is, both for the kids that are in the program and then what happens to them after they get out, after they're released into the wild. They're not prepared. They are preyed upon. They're given resources that are stolen or they're killed over it. It's just it's horrible. But going down there, I had developed a relationship with a director of an orphanage that was in this little small border town called Tyotkina that was just back to back with the Ukrainian border. This is in 2004. So the Orange Revolution's going on right now, and I'm not really paying that much attention to it because I'm not really dealing with Ukraine. And, I know there's stuff going on over there, but I'm not thinking about how I'm influenced or the area that I'm in is being influenced by that geopolitically. I'm just down there, and this guy needs a bathroom rebuilt for his orphanage because it's just horrible. It is absolutely horrible what it looks like in there. And where they bathe these kids, there's sewer gases just venting directly into the room. It's cold, it's dank, it's dark. It's just, thinking about it, as a kid, me and my brothers playing in the bathtub and splashing around, and mom laughing, and soap bubbles on our heads and stuff like that. And it was nothing like what these kids were being exposed to as adults. And it was such a shaping influence, and my love for my brothers, what they're going through, and the horror, and just the physical environment that it was in was just. I would have been scared to take a bath in that place. Wow. It was just horrible. It was dark. They were using a wood burning kiln to heat the water that they'd mixed with the cold water, and this, moldy, rusty, cold, dark place. So he said, I'd really like to get this rebuilt. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but, we're going to do this. And, we came back to visit him. This was about the last time we could get in there before, the heavy winter sets, and you don't want to travel the couple 100 miles that I had to travel to go see these guys. And again, like I said, it's just sitting right on the border. So we show up in the spring, and I drive up like in March, and where this place is, we're supposed to rebuild, he's already torn it down. They don't have a bathroom where they bathe these kids anymore. They've got a little makeshift one upstairs, but I am committed to rebuilding this bathroom now because I gave the guy my word. So, and I was coming there to think about how I was going to do it. Now my hand was forced, but it was not, God's in control, and he was able to help me get the resources. And so in May, we were down there to rebuild it. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a whole bunch. It was the biggest expansion of my language capabilities ever, being down there by myself without, the real help of any interpreters. And we're sitting there, and we had been down. There was another orphanage down the street that had some vision impaired kids, and we were like going down there and visiting with them. Knew a bunch of the kids from lots of visits, and we'd been down there. We knew when the older kids had recess, and so we were down there to play soccer with them. And we were down there playing, having a good time. Get in the van, drive back down to our orphanage, and all of a sudden this military jeep comes pulling up in front of us, and this guy with a machine gun, strapped in front of him, comes flying out of the car and says, let me see your papers, documents, and so, and everybody that's with me knows that, that when I am talking to the authorities, and again, this is part of that authority story, don't interrupt, don't try to translate for me, don't be a part of it. The only way that you'll ever go with me is you, in these situations, I'm the one that's in charge. And even if I don't understand the languages, I'm trusting that God's going to protect me in the situation, and consequently, He's going to protect you. So just sit back there. Don't say anything. We can talk about it afterwards, but don't try to help me. And it was in that, so the guy wanted my papers, and I knew what he had asked for, but I gave my car papers, and he throws them right back in my lap. Says, nope, this is not what I want. I want to see, he wanted to see the reason why I was in his country. So he looked at my papers, and he looked at, and there was two other Americans with me. One of them was Jedediah. He was my contractor. He knew what we were doing. I'm just the figurehead getting us there. And then there was another guy that had a close relationship. I'd brought a couple young men from the orphanage that were older, that were sober-minded, and they were going to be great helps. We were going to use the youth, the strength of their youth is what we were going to do. And they were part of it. They wanted to be a part of it. They thought it was fun. They liked being around me. We were going to have a good time. We were going to be working, but we're going to have a good time. So so in that process, we got detained, and they brought I say KGB. The KGB didn't exist anymore, but nobody knows or fewer people know the FSB, which is basically their FBI, if you will. And they had a lot more power than the KGB ever did. So they say, hey, we don't want you to go anywhere. We're going to stay here. We want you tomorrow morning. We want you to be here. And they interrogated us all day. And so what happened for the next week, we just basically went from the smallest outpost all the way to the state capitol with regards to their FSB dudes along the way, trying to figure out what we were doing down there. They were concerned about what was happening on the other side of the border. And there were 3 Americans walking around, and one of them had a camera. Well, I didn't actually have a camera. It was one of the Russian boys, and that's kind of what saved us a little bit. One of the Russian boys, a family had given him a digital camera, and now I had my camera, but I was just filming around our work site and just documenting what we were doing. But they were on the border taking pictures, and they wanted to know what we were, what's the U.S. Americans doing down there and this is the whole region that is in conflict right now with all the bombing, the Donbass region. So I found out what was going on was there was so what you had to do if you were out, it's still a very closed society. If you're traveling in Moscow or in Russia, whenever you stop in a particular state, you have to register so they know where you're at. So I had done that. I had met the requirement in the region that I was in, and then we had transferred from there, and we had told them we were going to be at this orphanage. I'm rebuilding the bathroom. And so it's documented in their paperwork. It's not automated. Yeah. And these guys pulled up because they had heard somebody had said something about us being where we're here in the area. And so the guy said, we've been looking all for you. And I said, all you had to do is ask any kid in this village. And they knew exactly where we were at any moment of the day because they love playing with us. And which is true. I'd helped the guy with his soccer team to get him over to a game, all kinds of stuff. They knew that, hey, go ask the crazy bald-headed American guy, and they're gonna, and he'll help you out. Whatever you want to do, he's gonna join in, because that's how I was. Yeah. And so we got detained. The worst part about this was I was so worried about the director of the orphanage that we were helping out because they were threatening him for not letting them know what we were doing and that we were there and getting permission to do it. And they were just strong arming him. And when we pulled into one of these, it's one of these stations that I checked in before when we were staying at a different place. And so the military guy that was in charge of that outpost knew we were there, or knew us or knew of me. And I'd been there several times, and I'd been invited into his office and sat down in front of him, and he grilled us on what we were doing, and he was doing his job. But we went in. So while they're taking spec, they sat in there, and the guy, his attendant knew who I was, and just told me go in there with my guys and sit down. So we're all sitting down in front of this guy's desk, and I look behind his desk, and there's like a piano wire that's strung up in the back, and it's got 2 pieces of burlap cloth hanging for this, and they're like makeshift curtains. And behind it was the piece of plexiglass with a map behind it of that region. And there are all kinds of X's and O's and lines and stuff like that. And it was their battle plans to defend in case we got overrun. This is what they were going to do.
Wow.
Now I had no idea. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I just looked up and looking around, and just this guy's going to wait. And I hear him walk in, and can hear him thumping through, and can hear the Russian voices in the other room. And he comes walking in, and he walks in, and he looks over, and he looks at me. As soon as he sees me and he sees all the guys sitting behind me, all of a sudden he looks up on the wall, and he can see that his map is exposed. And he kind of like, you could see him like freeze for a second. He walked over and he grabbed those 2 curtains and he slammed them shut and said, "I'll be right back." And he goes out and he just yelling his ass off with the guards. "Well, what are they doing in there? This is, oh yeah." He's just going off. And it was then when it was later, I wasn't sure at the time what was going on, but I started thinking about it. That's what we were in trouble for. They were worried about what was going on with the Orange Revolution, and they thought we might be trying to recoiter ways for NATO to bust through into their motherland. So anyway, that's how I got. So that's the story behind. I got arrested by the KGB for taking pictures of ducks.
Wow. That's just crazy to have. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm so glad that you're here and you made it through, because at any point in that story, it could have went a completely different way.
I had more danger with the GAI, which is the military police over there, because they, it's the graft and corruption over there is so amazing, and I don't care who you are. As soon as they get any kind of whiff that you might be a victim, the police will pull you over, and they're looking for a bribe. I had so much fun thwarting those guys and I never paid a bribe. Never. Other of my co-conspirators is probably the best way to think about it. Have thought of ways to have paid the bribe just because it was expedient. But I never did. I tell you what, I pissed off a whole lot of GAI. So,
so Ted, you're back here. You're doing some amazing things. What is bringing you joy right now?
I'm a pretty upbeat guy. Somebody asked me, "How's your day going?" A pretty common answer is phenomenal. Because I'm vertical. I've got all my capabilities, all my faculties. I have a good job. I have a solid, stable family. I'm blessed. I really am blessed. I could not ask for anything more. I was really kind of hoping to win the lottery last night or night before last, but I didn't. So I will live again. But I'm just, for me, every day is an adventure. And I'm always, I'm an impromptu guy because I love the spontaneity of the situation. Perfect example of that. Another Russia story was we were spending the summer there, and there was nobody in the orphanage. They were all, we had pretty much everybody was out. We were just basically, caretakers for a big facility that had hardly anybody in it during the summer months. A lot of times we'd get families in the United States to host kids for the summer. And what that did is that helped accelerate their language skills. And a Russian orphan, the best tool that we could ever give them was the ability to speak, write, read, and understand English and Western culture, because they were able to skip the line because of their language skill in that country was so sought after and desired. It still is. So we'd send them to the States, and then they'd come back in the fall. But we'd just recently got them off. It was kind of like the doldrums of summer, if you will. It was kind of like laid back. It was a nice, easy pace. And one Saturday morning, I got up and I told my family, which was my wife, my 2 daughters, and the two Galina and another young lady, Rachel. I said, "You guys come on, we're going somewhere." And they said, "Where are we going?" I said, "Just pack your stuff for picnic lunch. We're going." So everybody got ready, and everybody knew that when I said to do something like that, it was going to be adventure. So there was a little bit of overpacking. There was a little bit of anticipation of something fun happening. And we went to a train station, and I told him, I said, hey, we're going to take this train out of town. So I told my team, I said, you guys go ask, say, hey, if you could go anywhere today and just spend a day there, what would it be? On this train rail, on this train line. And so everybody went off, and it's a fun game for them. So they're all off. Everybody can speak Russian at this point. My girls, especially. My wife's not playing the game because she's my wife. She doesn't have to. But everybody else is out looking around, and the report comes back 3 out of 4. Solntsina is this little village that everybody wants to go. It stands for, literally says the city of sun, or the Sun City. So I said, okay. So we went and bought 2 round trip tickets to Solntsina for everybody, or round trip ticket for everybody of Solntsina. And so we get up there, and we find out when's the last train coming back into town, so that we knew we had to be back at the train station. And it was like right around 6 o'clock or 6:30, something like that. So we land in Solntsina, we get out, and I said, all right, now you got to ask, we're supposed to be here in Solntsina. Now you got to go find out, where are we supposed to be here? And we found out there's this little reservoir or lake, and there was a campground near it. And so we found a guy that took us there, dropped us off, and came back. So it was those types of adventures we had. It was just the most pleasant day. We just sat there. We cooked on a little grill some chicken, and had a fabulous meal, and just sat around and played and talked and laughed. And it was just a beautiful day in the sun on a summer day. So as a family.
All right, Ted, this is the second segment of the show. This is where we dive a little bit more into you. We talk a little bit more about mental health. I'm a very big proponent of believing that these conversations help people, being able to acknowledge that pretty much everybody, even if we are positive, optimistic people, there are times that we may have a down day, or a day that just we feel the weight of things on us. But knowing that everybody goes through that helps us to get through that, to feel, that we are not alone. But for you, Ted, how do you keep the darkness at bay?
That's a great question. And I know it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I, as a kid, I did too, and through early adulthood. But it's my faith, in a Savior, Jesus Christ, is when I was in my early 30s when I got saved. And I have since then, I think, developed a really, really, really close relationship with God. And that's acknowledging that He's the authority of my life. Mm-hmm. And that He's here to protect me, to provide for me. And when I learned that that's the relationship that I have with the Creator of the universe, I have difficult times. There's no doubt. Everybody does, interpersonal. Mm-hmm. I don't care whether it's your wife, your kids, your work, fellow employee, a friend. It's, anytime that there's 2 people involved, there's an opportunity for something to go wrong, and for somebody's emotions to get hurt, or for somebody to get hurt, or taken advantage of. And it's by having, I think, an understanding that ultimately God's the one that's in charge. And so whenever I see something happening around me, and I really learned this, I got a PhD. I got my degree in theology, my PhD or PhD, or whatever you want to call it, and over in Russia, because there was so many times I was so dependent upon God at that instant, for direction, for an answer, advice on what to do in that particular situation, for His protection, because I could no way to control it. And man, He came through every single time. So whenever something's going wrong, I have to think about, okay, I ask myself, why possibly could God be letting this right now? I remember, and it doesn't matter whether it was there or here. That's the way I live my life now. And so whenever I get discouraged, it's pretty much, it doesn't take that long for me to check in with the person that literally has saved my life over and over and over and over again. And that is, with God through prayer, to say, what do I do here? I've read the Bible inside and out. I've done words. I'm an analytical guy, so I look at the word study, and And so if you ask me to quote a verse, I'm really bad at it. You ask me to talk about the theme of what God was trying to say to me through it. I know what that is. I've learned those lessons. And so that's where I apply it. And people say, well, Ted, that's a pretty easy out. No, it's not. It is so much harder to turn control over to something you can't physically see, or you can't physically know. But there's a sense of hope or faith that's embedded in that. And then when you so consistently, statistically, are blessed because of this, up front, I live a very blessed life. And in our current culture, there's a lot of people that feel guilty for having the life that I have, because society's making them do that. But I know that there's somebody in charge of society, and he has really guided me to where I'm at right now. So as long as I listen to a podcast, I went to school several years back to become an economist, just because I love an aspect of economics called behavioral economics. That's why do people make the wrong decision when it's in their better interest to do something else economically. So that's a really cool study. But in that whole process of studying for that, I learned so many things about how you can be fitted in ways that you don't expect. And so just really trying to go back to the answer find my way back to that answer real quick. But it was just this idea of darkness is that I can become a victim. I can just really let it take over my life, or I can partner up with the people that God has surrounded me with and say, hey, this is the situation. Let's work through this together. And that's where I tell you that I learned it from my mom. That's where the idea of this empathy comes through is that there's so much going on. You've got so little opportunity to influence it. If you develop a strong following of beliefs and you apply those consistently, it's just going to benefit you. Just like my military career did, just like the way it did through all the different product development jobs, the time in Russia, all the other jobs that I've held. You just see that pattern over and over and over and over and over. So.
Do you think that relationship you have, with God, was there a time, prior? You say you got saved in your 30s. What was that defining moment where you said that I need this?
There's no great big huge flash boom kind of thing. It was for me. It wasn't. I didn't have the Paul experience in Damascus. I wasn't just knocked off a horse and didn't know anything for 3 days until all of a sudden, I think I figured this one out. I think he said something to me. Right. It was a lot more gradual for me. And it was just taking a smaller step in faith in that direction. And then I go, that kind of worked out okay. Maybe there's something to this. I wish it had been. I wish I'd gotten $743 million like that, and I said, "Thank you, God." Yeah. But that's not what happened. And when we went to Russia, knowing that we were basically paying for our way there, getting it there, that made me dependent upon God and His people. And I didn't ask. I didn't say I was going to do this. It just stuff started showing up because I had emptied my pockets out. I'd emptied out my 401k, my wife's 401k. We sold everything. We sold every possession. My kids sold their Beanie Babies. Wow. And we just put it all together in the pot, and we had enough for about 3/4 of our first year there. And they said, well, what are you going to do about the other? And I said, hey, I don't know. I put everything I can in. I'm dependent upon God and to do the rest. And he showed up every single time. So in miraculous ways. And miraculous ways, he saved us while we were there. And since I've been back, he's met it. I know that when we went over there, I knew that I was going over in the prime time of my earning potential. And I said, I told my wife and I, we had this conversation, we could play it safe. We could stay here. we can put the girls in school. We can do this. We can do that. I can find another job. We can move whatever, any thousands of things we could have done. But I said, if we do this, I believe that that even though this is going to delay my retire or to build assets for myself, I'd rather do this right now in my youth. I was 38 when we went over there. My wife was 37. My kids were not even teenagers yet. They were adolescents. That the experience as a family together would be that much richer, that much greater, and it would provide for them so much more opportunities in the future as far as my two daughters than if I played it safe. And so we gave it all to God, said, here it is. We're all, what's next? And he guided us step by step. It was, like I said, it was funny. A good friend of mine had left when our Daystar got shut down. He left and he got a job opportunity at Dell. Really nice job doing the exact same thing he was, with tremendous amount of opportunity. Dell was really hot at that time. The Apple market was Apple was almost ready to close. Stock price was, I don't know, $4, $3, $5, $6, $7, $9, something like that. It was nothing. And that's since splits and all kinds of stuff. It was nothing. And I got a phone call from David. He'd gone there and he said, hey, they're looking for another product manager. I'd love to work with you. I can provide some influence. Do you want to do this? And we've already got airplane tickets over there. It would have been easy to just say, you know what? Yep. Here's a safer job. Let's go do this. Mm-hmm. And I talked to Linda and we just felt like that was just the test, to determine whether we were really all in or not. And, as a matter of fact, my company told me that I was working for said that they were going to lay off a couple people. And I said, don't do that. I said, I haven't told you guys yet, but I'm moving to Moscow, Russia, because this is what God's telling me to do. I'm going to be running an orphanage over there. I said, I've still got 2 months before we go. But instead of paying me, these guys are going to be more critical for your company's success than you paying me for the next 2 months of me leaving. I'd hold on to those guys and pay them. And if you don't have the money to do it, don't bother paying me. So they didn't. And I worked for 2 more months as I helped transition out of that role. But they kept their jobs. And I think God blessed me and honored me, gave me that test. But he knew we were there. We were in it to win it. And he could count on us and we could count on him. So I'm kind of hanging in for that for my own personal retirement plan is that I'm going to be dependent upon God. I'm going to work later than than a lot of people. And they said, that's poor financial planning. Well, I'm saving, I'm doing everything that I can, but I invested in a completely different security system than a lot of people do.
All right, Ted, this is the third segment of the show. This is time now for the Fast Five. The Fast Five. It's time now for the Fast Five. Fast Five. Fast Five is powered by Poddex. It's an app created by my friend Travis Brown. It's great for podcasters. It's interview questions, but it's also got some great icebreakers in there. There's an app you can find in any of the app stores that are out there, but you can get physical decks as well. They're really cool for, like I said, icebreaker questions. Keep a couple in your wallet, if you just got to speak in front of, a corporate meeting or something. It's a great way to just break the ice. As a matter of fact, if you go to the website at chewingthefatbr.com/poddex and use the promo code CHEW, you get 10% off of your physical decks. But I'm going to use the app. It's 5 questions. Just first thing comes off the top of your head. No wrong answers. All right. You ready?
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. All right. Question number 1. This is perfect, seeing as you were in the Coast Guard. If you were a captain of a ship, what would you call it?
I'd call it gentleness. 1, it's one of the fruits of the Spirit, but 2, it's something that as a seafaring man, there's nothing more than a gentle sea that's more relaxing than having to fight your ass off to stay afloat. So I'm serious. I've been in some storms. I mean, we got caught when I was in the Coast Guard we were intercepted a ship carrying a whole bunch of drugs up off the coast of Boston. We got caught in a nor'easter, and we sat there we got salt water in some of our electric motors, and so we had diminished capacity. The boat that we had busted had diminished capacity. 3/4 of the crew was sick because we were rolling starboard to port. It was 45 degrees starboard, 45 degrees port all night long, all day long for 4 or 5 days in a row. It was miserable. So I'll take gentleness. I didn't get seasick. So I was one of the fortunate few that got to stand 6 hours on, 6 hours off because everybody else was under the weather. It was just miserable.
Wow.
But so gentleness, that's what I'd call it. That's what I'd name it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Question number 2. What was the last book you read? Oh, a great book. A couple of them. I've read, I read a lot, and sometimes they're intermixed. There's I'm looking at my phone because I want to make sure I get the titles right. One's called Influence, which is from a podcast. I love listening to Freakonomics, and Freakonomics has multiple ones. Great podcast as well too. But I love. There was a book in there by a guy named, I want to say Caldini. Give me a second here. But it basically, the subtitle is how to get anybody to do anything. And it talks about this idea of things that you can control in a relationship in order to influence the decision-making process. Again, going back to my behavioral economics ideas. Yeah. Can you use it? Can you use it to manipulate a situation? Yeah. He even addresses that in the book. He said his brother's kind of like that. But there's some other aspects of it that I think they're super sharp that really make a big difference. There's another one that I read recently. I reread it. It's called by a guy named Bob Goff called Love Does. I don't know if you've never read that book. It's a bunch of little short stories. Fabulous. It talks a lot about a lot of things that motivate me and the reason why I do them. And then I'm always reading some nonprofit book, some fiction book. I love thrillers. I love Jack Reacher stories. So Lee Child, love Matt Damon. I love all the Bourne Identity books. Any thriller. I'm actually got an idea for one that I've actually written a couple chapters on. Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So
very cool. Awesome. All right. Question number 3. If humans came with a warning label, what would yours say?
Mine would say, I break things easily. So, no, I mean, yeah, it's just any situation. You go charging in, you can mess stuff up real fast if you don't just take a second back and pause. And, I've, in all of my episodes, all my incidents or life lessons has been learning from the mistakes that you make with other people.
Wow. That's awesome. All right. Number 4. You can choose anyone in the world to become friends with. Who would you choose?
Oh, God, I can't answer that one. There's just so many different people. And I have so many different interests with regards to things that I like to do. I can always do the Miss America or the Miss World or answers with regards to that. And, I'd like to go to have dinner with Gandhi or something like that. But, there's a guy that's got a Instagram following, Humans of New York. That guy, love reading stories of people that he's interacted with. So, oftentimes there's just these people that are just all around you that are doing some amazing things or have had some amazing tragedy in their lives. And for me, I've got friends that are going through difficult times. My kids, my wife at different times have had, difficult times. Going back to the idea of empathy, just have compassion for people and seeing what's going on. So who that would be, there's a lot of people that, Mother Teresa did cool stuff like that, or this guy or that guy, but just, I don't know. I instead of picking one person, I'd rather just run into him by chance and say, wow, that was a fantastic encounter.
I'd love that. That's a great answer. All right. And number 5. What's the disadvantage of playing things safe?
Oh my God, what a great question. That's right there. That's God at work right there. With regards to, my dad, I love my dad to death. But he was a play it safe kind of guy. He was never one to put it all on the table and take a big risk. And all my life, my dad's been, somebody whose opinion I really, really value. And oftentimes as an adult man, I've sought him for answers that for his life made a lot of sense, but for mine, by me following him, there was a opportunity missed. So I think I've started over so many times doing so many different trades, and I've had such a great life doing it because I've been exposed to so many things. If I hadn't gone to Russia, my life would be completely different, and it was completely against his advice. And we've had that conversation. He knows that. And I still think to this day that some of the harebrained ideas that I've thought of from a product or a company idea, there are opportunities where if I would have taken more of a risk, it would have been a different situation. But like I said, I don't, very early on in this podcast, I said, I don't really look towards the past. I just, I'm going to take every opportunity and every adventure as it comes on, and I'm going to pursue it with all my gusto until God calls me home. So.
That's awesome, Ted. Ted, that is our Fast Five, and that is the show. Thank you so much for being here, spending some time with me today. I really appreciated learning more about you and being able to deepen our friendship. If folks want to keep up with you, what's the best way they can find you?
I have a YouTube channel. That's probably the best way because I try all my personal stuff. I try different things to it. But the thing that I think consistently has me, and I'm pretty positive. I sent it. I gave it to you in the links. It's my YouTube channel, and I want to do more vlogs where I tell more of the stories about the things that I've experienced. Not to build me up with regards to this great adventure or this person that's important, but to encourage people to, like you had asked in this very last question, is to not take the easy way out, to challenge yourself, to push a little bit harder. That's going to, if you're thinking about your career, that's going to deepen your career. If you're thinking about your personal relationships, you don't want to take risks there, but oftentimes you're going to get advice that other people think's better for you. But in your heart, if you have some guidance and some wisdom when you make those kinds of decisions, don't do the stupid thing. Don't always go for weigh it between the analytical and the emotional. I think your life will be a lot better off. Awesome.
Well, I'll make sure to put a link to your YouTube channel on the show notes, as well as you can find out more about Ted and all his links on the guest page at chewingthefatbr.com. Again, Ted, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Rob, I had so much fun. This is so cool. It's a great aspect of what, as I mentioned before, see what you do and how you do it. I'm a new follower, and I encourage anybody that's listening to this to become a follower too, and to reach out to Rob if you've got something to say. We all want to hear it.
Well, I appreciate that, Ted. And if you would like to help support this podcast financially, I'd appreciate it if you bought me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. But until next time, I look forward to the chance we have to sit a spell and chew the fat.